Week 14 wrapped up last night with the New England Patriots absolutely walloping the Houston Texans. On to Week 15. There's only 3 weeks left in the regular season now, so lots of really meaningful, significant games here this week. Want to talk about a few of them now. Let's start with a Thursday night game. Now, it's only meaningful for one team, the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati goes on the road to face the Philadelphia Eagles. Bengals installed as a 3-point favorite on BETDAQ. The Eagles have been terrible this season. I mean, it's well documented. They broke their 8-game losing streak last week in shocking fashion by beating the Tampa Bay Bucks. Nobody saw that coming. Bucks were a 9-point favorite. I was backing the Bucks, gave me my only loss of Sunday. And even though that didn't work out well for me, I don't know. I have trouble seeing how Cincinnati is only a 3-point favorite over the Eagles here. I understand it's in Philadelphia. And maybe people think that the Eagles have sort of turned over a new leaf these last couple of weeks. I mean, they've covered twice in a row for the first time all season. Of course, they pulled out that cover 2 weeks ago against Dallas because they ran back a punt with 30 seconds left when they were down 11 points. I still have almost no faith in the Philadelphia Eagles. I understand Nick Foles threw for, 380 yards last week or whatever. Tampa has the worst secondary in the NFL, 32nd in pass defense. Cincinnati has an excellent defense. Even last week in their loss against Dallas, the Bengals really suffered a gutting loss last week to the Dallas Cowboys, up 9 points with 7 minutes left in a game they had to have. They ended up not being able to come out with a win, even though they were at home. Cincinnati now, because Pittsburgh also lost to the San Diego Chargers, still tied with Pittsburgh for the final wild card spot in the AFC. So it's a huge game for the Cincinnati Bengals. They've been playing very well on the defensive side of the ball. Last week, Philadelphia held their opponent below 28 points for the first time since Todd Bowles has taken over as defensive coordinator. So I still think this Eagles team is terrible. And even though I'm not a big believer in the Cincinnati Bengals yet, I think Cincinnati is clearly better than Philadelphia. And it's still a couple of days before the game now, but I doubt I'm going to change my mind on this one. I do like Cincinnati to cover 3 points on the road in Philadelphia on Thursday night. Let's talk about some of the Sunday games. One game that, it's huge for the Giants. I guess Atlanta, they already have the NFC South locked up, and they're in great shape as far as home field advantage goes, even though they lost last week to Carolina. The 49ers are really their only threat as far as taking away their home field advantage, and they're a game and a half ahead of the Niners because, remember, the Niners do have a tie on their resume. They're hosting the New York Giants on Sunday. Big game for the Giants. Giants are only a game ahead of Dallas and Washington in the NFC East. Atlanta's only a 1-point favorite on BETDAQ. But, I think it's a big game for Atlanta, too. And not so much because, like we said, they've already locked up the division. They're still in good shape as far as home field advantage goes because San Francisco, the only team that can catch them, the Niners go on the road this week to play New England. So Atlanta could lose this game and still be in good shape with home field, as far as locking up home field advantage in the NFC. But all year, Atlanta really hasn't gotten the respect, and they're the first ones to say it. You haven't heard people talk about Atlanta as one of the very best teams in the NFL, even though they have had the best record in the NFL until this week. They were the last undefeated team in the NFL. Then after they lost, Atlanta and Houston for the last few weeks have had the best record in the league, the only two one-loss teams. Well, both those two teams now obviously have 2 losses. So I guess actually Atlanta still is tied for the best record in the league. I didn't even put that together. See, it's not like this is all pre-recorded, and it is pre-recorded, obviously. It's not live, but it's not like I'm reading from cue cards here. Sometimes I'll think of things as I'm saying it. And being that Houston lost last night, I guess Atlanta still tied for the best record in the NFL. But after losing last week on the road against Carolina, I think there's a whole lot of people, not only fans, but a whole lot of people in and around the NFL who say, there you go, same old Atlanta Falcons. I mean, we've seen this before. The Mike Smith, Matt Ryan Atlanta Falcons run through the regular season, and then, as we know, Matt Ryan has never won a playoff game. So there's a lot of doubts about the Atlanta Falcons heading into these playoffs, and not that really matters because Atlanta's going to be able to prove it all on the field, but I'm sure it bothers those guys, and you've heard some statements from that locker room this year about how they didn't feel like they maybe were getting the respect. I mean, you've heard people say the San Francisco 49ers were the best team in the NFC, even though Atlanta's had a better record than them all season. Of course, people haven't been saying that about San Francisco since they lost to St. Louis a couple of weeks ago. But to me, to legitimize themselves as a playoff contender, maybe to themselves, and maybe that's ridiculous. Maybe that's just some guy in a room talking about a team that I obviously I don't know any of the guys in that team. I'm not plugged in the Atlanta Falcons by any means, so maybe I'm trying to make too much of it. But I don't know. Something tells me that at home against the defending Super Bowl champions, it's a big game for Atlanta on Sunday. A big game. After a loss to their division rival, Carolina, a bad team, if they were to lose this game, I mean, this is not the direction you want to be heading going into the postseason. And right now, it's early. It's still Tuesday as we're filming this. This game, obviously, not until Sunday. But I do lean towards the Falcons here. The Giants, I know they've been good and bad this season. They were good last week in blowing out the New Orleans Saints. But, you know, Atlanta's been really good this year, obviously. They've only lost 2 games. And the Giants very vulnerable in the secondary. It showed again last week their vulnerabilities in the secondary. I like Atlanta at home in this situation. I'm a little surprised they're only a 1-point favorite. I thought this line was going to be around 3 or 3.5. But again, it speaks to the lack of belief that people still have in this Atlanta Falcons team. Be very curious to see how that game plays out on Sunday. Another game that's big in the NFC playoff race. The Minnesota Vikings going on the road to take on the St. Louis Rams. Now, prior to the season, fans of either one of these teams would be thrilled if you'd have told them that Week 15 they were involved in a game that was significant in the playoff race, but that's the case here. And both of these teams still somewhat of a long shot. Minnesota a game behind Seattle for the final wild card spot in the NFC. St. Louis a game and a half. They also have 6 losses like the Vikings, but remember, St. Louis does have a tie on their resume a couple of weeks ago, or I guess that game was about a month ago, a little more than that, against the San Francisco 49ers. So this is probably an elimination game. The loser is probably eliminated, but the winner, if they win out, and after this week there are only going to be 2 more games, so winning out all of a sudden becomes realistic. You never know what might happen, especially when we see the Chicago Bears falling apart. Seattle, even though they're playing really well, they have a rookie quarterback and they still have some road games left, and we know Seattle's much better at home than they are on the road. So big game for Minnesota and St. Louis, obviously. St. Louis a 3-point favorite in this game. I had a feeling, you know, when I saw they were going to play this week before I saw the line, I just had a feeling Minnesota was going to be a 1 or 2 point favorite. The Rams just got no respect all year. They've been a great play as a home underdog. They've won 4 times outright as a home underdog this season, but finally, looks like odds makers coming around on the Rams a little bit. Rams a 3-point favorite over the Vikings. Listen, Adrian Peterson playing as well as any player in the NFL right now, not only any running back. He's only 506 yards away from breaking Eric Dickerson's all-time NFL single-season rushing record. And Peterson told Peter King yesterday that he has an eye on that record. St. Louis is tough on defense, but Peterson just ran all over a tough defense last week in the Chicago Bears. However, Minnesota is so bad right now at the quarterback position. I mean, even though they beat the Bears last week, Christian Ponder, 91 passing yards and an interception. St. Louis has a really, really good secondary. Cortland Finnegan and Janoris Jenkins, even though Jenkins is a rookie, 3 defensive touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. I mean, that's about as good a cornerback tandem as there is in the NFL right now. I do not have much faith in Christian Ponder, that Christian Ponder-led offense going into St. Louis and picking up a win, especially if Danny Amendola can finally play this week. The Rams pulled out a tough win on the road last week, 15-12 over Buffalo. But once again, they obviously missed Danny Amendola. I mean, he's missed the last couple games. He's been in and out of the lineup this season. He's been banged up. He had a broken collarbone early in the year. This guy is key to the offense. And it sounds funny to say that really a slot wide receiver could make such a difference in an offense. But if you've seen the St. Louis Rams play with and without Amendola, you can see that it clearly does make a difference because this team struggles to pass the ball anyway. Even when he's on the field, they're not a great passing offense, but he gives them something. He's a guy, maybe the only guy Sam Bradford is really comfortable throwing the ball to. He's got great hands. He can get open. And the Rams have some sort of passing game. They have a semblance of a passing game when he's on the field. They have one of the worst looking passing games. I say one of the because nobody can be worse than Arizona right now, right? But the Rams have a really dysfunctional looking passing game when Amendola is not on the field. And Minnesota's been playing well on the defensive side of the ball. I think whether or not he's going to be able to play is going to be big this week. He's been questionable to doubtful the last couple of weeks. He's been made inactive before the game, each of the last 2 weeks. But on Tuesday and Wednesday, the Rams fans have thought, well, maybe there's a chance he might play, but he's not played the last 2 weeks. Going to be big to have him on the field this week. If Amendola is going to play, I do think I'm going to like the St. Louis Rams in this game because even though Minnesota's doing a lot of good things right now, unless we hear the announcement this week that they're going to bench Christian Ponder in favor of Joe Webb, which is a move I think they should make, by the way, because Ponder's not giving him anything right now in the passing game. And Webb can run. Now, I know Ponder's mobile too, but Webb can really run. This was a guy who it was thought could maybe play wide receiver at the NFL level. And we saw last year he could throw the ball a little bit too. So he might give you something. If you're getting nothing, if Christian Ponder is only somebody who can hand off the ball right now, which is basically what he is, when he puts the ball up in the air. As a matter of fact, how about this? How about this stat? I heard this. This is an incredible stat, okay? Adrian Peterson is averaging more yards per carry this year than Christian Ponder is averaging more yards per pass attempt. That is unbelievable and speaks to just how bad Christian Ponder and the Minnesota passing game has been and just how good Adrian Peterson, who once again has staked his claim as the best running back in the NFL, a surefire future Hall of Famer. Adrian Peterson, greatness in our midst. This guy's been incredible this year, but I don't know. I don't know if I like his and the Vikings' chances on the road unless there's a shakeup in the quarterback situation. And we haven't gotten, there's been no hint that that's going to happen. The Vikings, their front office, they're committed to Christian Ponder, drafted him in the top 15 a couple of years ago, just last year. And a lot of people thought that was a reach. I believe 12th overall is where Christian Ponder was drafted. And obviously the front office, they want to show that it was not a reach. They want it to work with Christian Ponder, but there comes a time, do you want to make the playoffs this season, or do you want to try to develop your young quarterback? I know the coaching staff sees these two guys at practice every day, but it's hard to believe that Joe Webb couldn't give them something more than Christian Ponder is giving them at this point. Anyway, we'll see if they can beat St. Louis on the road on Sunday. Two other NFC North teams fighting with the Vikings right there. Both these teams are, I guess Chicago is a game ahead of the Vikings. Green Bay 2 games ahead of the Vikings. They meet on Sunday in Chicago. The Packers a 3-point road favorite. Listen, I was very unimpressed with the Packers on Sunday Night Football, and I was backing the Packers, so I was rooting for them. They're just not very good on offense this year. And it sounds funny to say that. And by the way, most people have not come around, and most people have not been able to say that. I was hearing the analysts after the game on ESPN, Tom Jackson, I believe, I forget who else it was, but these guys were talking about how, wow, the rest of the NFC should really be on notice now because Green Bay showed on Sunday night that they can run the ball. And we all know they can pass it with anybody in the league. Well, the fact is they can't anymore, okay? This is a team that is not in the top half of the NFL in total yards per game, in points per game. You can't find an offensive statistic where they're in the top 10 of the league. This is a huge drop-off from what they've been over the last couple of seasons. And we can argue all day about what it is. Changes at the running back position. The offensive line's gotten worse. But, right now, the Green Bay offense is a dink-and-dunk offense with a bad offensive line. That's what they are. Aaron Rodgers constantly under fire, not able to get the ball downfield much. I know the weather was bad this past game when he only threw for 173 yards. But still, Matt Stafford was playing in the same game, and he outperformed Rodgers. And that's been par for the course this year for Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. The offenses they've played have largely thrown the ball for more yards than they have, which is shocking because, again, Green Bay led the NFL last year in points per game, 35 points per game. Aaron Rodgers was league MVP. Yet Green Bay's only topped 31 once this season, tied with the Jacksonville Jaguars in that category. And we're in week 15 now. This is what it is. It's not like, well, the Packers, they can still do it as well as anybody in the league. They just haven't yet. No. If they could have done it as well as anybody in the league, they would have by now. All that being said, and I know they're facing a tough defense on Sunday in Chicago, how do you back the Chicago Bears right now? You want to talk about a team that is absolutely dissolving and disintegrating, just like last season. Of course, last season they had an excuse, Jay Cutler's injury, and they used that excuse. We heard Bears fans, even NFL analysts, I said fanalists because I was already on to the next thought. Bears fans, NFL analysts, just make that fanalists. But Bears fans and even objective NFL analysts last season were saying that the Bears might have been the best team in the NFC had Jay Cutler stayed healthy. Well, might I remind you, and we were reminded last week, as we're reminded periodically throughout Jay Cutler's career, it's happened a couple times this season. Another time was the first game against Green Bay early in the year when the Packers blew out the Bears. But Jay Cutler is Jay Cutler. This guy is not a championship quarterback. I don't believe a team can win a Super Bowl with Jay Cutler at the helm. Extremely inconsistent. His attitude and heart has been questioned, not only by people by me, but by teammates of Jay Cutler publicly. Again, he left the game last week. Now, I know it was a vicious hit he took, no doubt about it. But We're hearing now that he's going to be good to go this week. He just has a little bit of neck soreness. Last week was a must-win situation. He did not come back in the game. There were less than 4 minutes left. We know now that it was not a significant injury. You've got to question the courage of somebody like that. And, maybe it sounds, I'm not the guy with 250-pound linebackers bearing down on me. I fully recognize that. I'm also not getting paid millions of dollars to be in that spot. When you compare Jay Cutler to other quarterbacks in the NFL, okay, I'm not comparing him to me or you or the guy working at McDonald's. When you compare him to other quarterbacks in the NFL, I just think there are a lot of guys who would have come in that situation and try to tough it out for their team. You just don't often see guys who aren't injured. And Jay Cutler, while he might have been hurt, he wasn't injured. We know that because he's going to be playing this week. You don't often see guys in that situation not come back in the game. And we saw a couple years ago in the postseason, Jay Cutler standing on the sideline, sort of indifferent look on his face. A lot of people, we heard a couple of anonymous teammates come out and say maybe he could have played then, stood on the sidelines as his team's season ended. And even when he's out there, I mean, this is a guy who is prone to turnovers, prone to taking sacks. Just don't trust Jay Cutler at all. Like Green Bay on the road in Chicago this week, even though, like I said, I've been unimpressed with the Green Bay Packers this season, and I do not think they're a legitimate threat to win a Super Bowl this year because I don't think they're good enough on offense. They're actually playing better on defense than they are on offense this year. Sounds funny to say the strength is the defense is the strength of the Green Bay Packers team, but this year that's a pretty accurate statement. We'll see if that holds true again on Sunday on the road in Chicago. Let's go to the AFC now. Let's talk about one AFC game that, both these teams are going to make the playoffs, but Denver on the road in Baltimore. I want to mention this game because I was very surprised at the number here. Denver only a 3-point favorite on the road in Baltimore. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a football expert to see that the Baltimore Ravens are not trending in the right direction. Couple of bad losses in a row. I guess a loss to a surging Washington team on the road last week. It's not like they played awful, but Washington's lost 6 games this season. The loss to Pittsburgh without Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback, that was a bad loss. And even though Baltimore is still in good shape in terms of the playoff race because their division rivals Pittsburgh and Cincinnati are also falling back, can't like the direction they're headed right now. They just don't look like a real good team, and Denver comes to town. The Broncos do look like a real good team. The Broncos look absolutely elite right now. I know, having watched New England play last night, and I know New England's already beaten Denver by 10 this season, so it's hard to say anybody but New England is the best team in the AFC right now, but boy, Denver has looked awful good the last few weeks. Their defense playing like a top 5 unit. They actually are top 5 in terms of yards allowed, and that's scary when you consider what they are on offense. I mean, on offense, they look just like the Indianapolis Colts circa 2005, 2006, 2007, any one of those Peyton Manning heyday teams. I mean, they're incredible. Manning is incredible, okay? Early in the season, I was trying to poke holes in this guy. I thought the first couple of weeks, maybe it looked like he didn't have the arm strength he used to. The ball was fluttering. They didn't look like they were going downfield as much as the Indianapolis offenses did in the past. I believe at some point in week 1 or 2, and I sort of thought, hey, that's a good analogy. I said I thought Peyton Manning looked like Chad Pennington with, a better football mind, or slightly more accurate Chad Pennington. Chad Pennington, of course, the weak-armed quarterback who spent most of his career with the New York Jets. Well, I'm through. I'm through trying to poke holes in Peyton Manning. I'm through trying to say he looks just like he did. To me, he looks just like he did in his prime. I know there's still some people saying, well, his ball's still floating a little bit, and not the arm strength he used to. Okay, maybe you can see that a little better than I can. I've seen this guy the last few weeks, and he looks just like the Peyton Manning that I remember seeing year in and year out for the Indianapolis Colts. Probably the best quarterback I've seen in my lifetime, and I can go back as far as Joe Montana, vividly remembering Joe Montana. Can't go back any further than that. And maybe it's sacrilege to say anybody's better than Joe Montana. Maybe it's sacrilege to say anybody's better than Tom Brady. Certainly, Brady's had more postseason success than Peyton Manning, has more Super Bowl rings. He's also had, you could argue, at least in the beginning, for sure, a better defense. Manning has always dealt with substandard defenses. I guess over the last couple of years, Brady has also had substandard defenses. But I just don't know if I've ever seen anybody do it any better than Peyton Manning, and he seems to be doing it at that level again this year. And as we said, he does not have a substandard defense anymore, so we'll see how deep this Denver team can go in the playoffs. But forget about the playoffs. This Sunday, they're on the road in Baltimore, and they're only laying 3 points. I mean, I know Baltimore's a good home team. The Ravens play well at home, but I don't know. I've been seeing Denver play, and I don't care if they're playing in Baltimore, in Stalingrad, on the moon. I like Denver -3 against the Baltimore Ravens right now. They look like they're clearly a better team. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if this line moved in the Denver direction throughout the week. I mean, we'll see. Maybe there's people out there with more faith in Baltimore than me, or maybe I'm missing something with the Denver Broncos, but I don't know. I don't know what I could be missing because I've seen this team play a lot of football this year, as we all have. They've had a lot of primetime games, and they've had a lot of the Sunday games they've played have been big time games that we paid attention to. The Denver Broncos look like a Super Bowl favorite right now, and I certainly lean towards them -3 in Baltimore on Sunday. Now, another game I want to briefly mention just because of the line. Detroit, a 5.5-point favorite on the road in Arizona. How are they only 5.5-point favorite? I mean, Arizona 58-0 last week. I was backing Seattle -10. Okay, so do we think that Arizona's magically going to get better these last few days? Do we think that they weren't trying against Seattle? Well, maybe they started not trying throughout the course of the game, but I mean, were they not motivated enough coming into that Seattle game? They had already lost, 8 straight games? Or they've lost 8 straight games, 9 straight games now? Fade Arizona. I mean, every chance you get. I know Detroit's been a terrible team to back this season. They've just been totally disappointing. I'm underwhelmed by Detroit. I was betting against Detroit on Sunday night against the Green Bay Packers. Came out with a push in that game, a tough push. Detroit kicking a field goal with 16 seconds left. To Green Bay -7. If you had Green Bay -7, came out as a push. But I don't care. I don't care how bad Detroit is. Until further notice, it's going to be the same players on offense for the Arizona Cardinals that we saw last week and the week before. It's still John Skelton and Ryan Lindley. I know they picked up Brian Hoyer this week, but they're probably not going to roll him in. And if they do, a few days practice with that offense, a guy who has no NFL experience himself, was on the street, is he going to be much better? I don't know. Again, am I missing something here? Why should I not back Detroit in this spot and lay 5.5 points? I realize Arizona might have some professional pride. I realize they're playing at home, but I don't know. I'll say it again, and I was correct last week, not patting myself on the back because it was not that hard. I didn't feel like I was going out, on any sort of limb saying it, but it happened. I said last week that I believed the Seattle defense would outscore the Arizona offense. Not only did they outscore them, they blew them out. The Seattle defense scored 2 touchdowns. Arizona, of course, could not generate a single point. Now, I know Detroit's not as good on defense as Seattle is, so Arizona might score 3 points, 7 points, 10 points, I don't know. But Detroit leads the NFL in pass yards per game. They're going to score some points. And again, I'll say it again, I think their defense might outscore the Arizona offense. Got to lean towards Detroit -5.5, don't you? On the road in Arizona. I mean, make it a small bet if you want. But, hey, if I'm missing something here, get with me. Get to me on BETDAQ NFL. Get to me, John, at BETDAQ NFL before I place the bet. Please. Tell me what I'm missing. Say, no, John, you've got it all wrong. Here's why Detroit's not a good bet in this spot. JOHN at BETDAQNFL.com or at BETDAQ NFL. Man, I'll listen to you. I mean, I'm open, but as of right now, I don't see where you make the case for Arizona here. Anyway, we still got a lot of the week left. We'll see how it develops. We'll see where this line goes. As of now, on BETDAQ, Detroit is a 5.5-point favorite. Let's talk about the Sunday night game. What a great game this is going to be. Very similar, I think, as far as the build up and anticipation to last night's New England-Houston game. The San Francisco 49ers going on the road to take on New England. Now, New England is installed as a 6-point favorite in this game. I'm told this line was going to be released at 4.5 or 5 before New England's performance last night when they were so impressive in dominating the previously 11-1 Houston Texans 42-14. Now, San Francisco, they might not be quite Houston on the offensive side of the ball, but they're much better than Houston on defense. And I know Houston's good on defense, but they're not the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco and Pittsburgh are the 2 best defenses in the NFL. San Francisco leads the league in scoring defense, which is, of course, the most important defensive statistic, points per game allowed. The Green Bay has the best offense in the NFL. Number 1 in the league in total yards, number 1 in the league in points per game. We saw them hang 42 on Houston last night. So strength versus strength, it's going to be fun. 6 might be a big number, but boy, tough to to bet against the New England Patriots right now after what we saw last night and after what we've seen really throughout the years. This Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, New England Patriots dynasty. And with Josh McDaniels back now calling the plays. Remember, McDaniels was calling the plays when they had that incredible undefeated regular season. McDaniels likes to throw the ball downfield a little bit. I mean, we know that, whether it's Bill O'Brien, whether it's McDaniels, whether it's Charlie Weiss, whoever's been the offensive coordinator, really Tom Brady is what makes it go. But it's been the same general scheme, but there have been subtle differences in those schemes depending on who the offensive coordinator is. And one of the differences when McDaniels is the offensive coordinator, they throw the ball downfield a little more. And McDaniels likes doing that. I mean, when he went to Denver, had Kyle Orton, they threw the ball downfield. When he was the offensive coordinator at St. Louis, last year they brought in Brandon Lloyd, who previously was at Denver, and they tried to throw the ball downfield a lot more certainly than St. Louis is throwing it this year. McDaniels likes to do that, and so, while he's calling plays, it's not a bad idea to bet on New England as a favorite because they're not the type of offense that is going to start running the ball and run out the clock when they're way up in the second half. And San Francisco, we assume Colin Kaepernick's going to start again at quarterback this week, so he is inexperienced. Bill Belichick has had great success throughout his career scheming against young, inexperienced quarterbacks. But one factor I want you to take into consideration here, and it's early in the week, you can never trust weather reports right now, and I tell you the truth, I haven't even looked at the weather report right now, the forecast, because they're so unreliable on Tuesday. I mean, meteorologists get it wrong the day before or 2 days before. What they say on Tuesday, you can't put any faith in that. But the fact that this number is 6, and the fact that we're talking about Foxborough, Massachusetts, in the middle of December, I understand it was 59 degrees last night, but we know the weather can change in a hurry in that part of the country this time of year. It could be freezing temperatures. I mean, it could be snow. It could be like it was in the Green Bay-Detroit game. I don't know the forecast yet, and I'm not even going to look at the forecast for a couple of days because I don't trust the forecast right now. But if you trust the forecast right now, if you've seen a forecast, if it's supposed to be cold, or if you just want to take the chance that it might be miserable weather, even if it's not freezing, it certainly could be 40 or 45 and raining. 6 points in weather like that, in inclement weather, I think you would like the dominant defense and 6 points in this situation. So we'll be keeping an eye on our weather. We'll be keeping an eye on weather in that game on Sunday night. If the weather's good, if it's 60 degrees like it was last night, Tom Brady and that offense going up against, even though San Francisco great on defense, going up against that San Francisco offense with an inexperienced quarterback, boy, to me, you'd have to lean towards New England if it was ideal conditions like it appeared to be last night. Do want to mention real quickly, though, what about Tom Brady and that New England offense? I mean, the brilliance of it, the brilliance of Tom Brady. And I know I just said that Peyton Manning, probably the best quarterback I think I've seen. I guess, and I mentioned maybe it's sacrilegious to say somebody's better than Tom Brady or Joe Montana. But boy, Brady is good. And it's not the surrounding cast. It's not the offensive coordinator. It's Brady. And if you think otherwise, as we mentioned, he just goes through offensive coordinators. Rob Gronkowski out of the lineup the last couple of weeks with injury. Does not matter one bit. Rob Gronkowski, his absence has not hurt this offense at all. The numbers have actually been better without him. And I'm not saying that they're better without Rob Gronkowski. He's probably the best tight end in the league. It just goes to show you. How good Brady is and how good the scheme is. I mean, and Brady will say himself, they've been running basically the same scheme ever since Charlie Weiss was the coordinator there, even though slight variations every year. But the New England offense is a machine. This year, again, they've picked it up as the year has gone along, and they're playing their best football right now when it matters. Really looking forward to seeing them on Sunday night take on San Francisco 49ers. One other significant game that I did not get to just because the line has not yet been released, Dallas and Pittsburgh, major playoff implications for both teams in that game. The line not yet released because injury questions for both teams. Still don't know Roethlisberger's status. Dez Bryant, the Cowboys' best wide receiver, he has a finger injury that we're hearing might keep him out of this game. So the line, I'm sure, will be released here in a couple of days. We'll be releasing a full video preview of that game and all of these other games here on BETDAQ NFL, in addition to several other things. We hope you check back with us throughout the course of the week. Get with me on Twitter at BETDAQ NFL. Send me an email, john at BETDAQNFL.com. I'd like to hear from you. Until then, for BETDAQ NFL, I'm John Arnette.